When disaster strikes, your environment plays a crucial role in your safety and survival. Cities, while hubs of innovation and opportunity, can quickly become danger zones during times of crisis. Hi, and welcome to this video, where we'll explore 7 compelling reasons to avoid cities during a disaster. From the challenges of overcrowding to the potential for strained resources, we'll break down how urban areas can transform into unpredictable and hazardous environments in the face of emergencies. Whether you're preparing for natural disasters, societal collapse, or unexpected emergencies, understanding the risks of remaining in the city could make all the difference when it matters most. If you're new here and care about practical tips to keep you and your loved ones safe, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stay tuned as we explore these vital survival insights. Let's get started. 1. The danger of other people. One of the most pressing dangers of staying in cities during a disaster is dealing with other people. High population density in urban areas can escalate stress levels dramatically as a large number of individuals live in close quarters. Disasters often amplify this stress, leading people to act unpredictably and even irrationally. Desperation can override morality, and even usually law-abiding citizens may resort to extreme measures to secure basic necessities like food, water, and medicine for themselves or their families. The psychological toll of fear and uncertainty in such situations can create a volatile atmosphere. Urban areas are also notorious for higher rates of crime and violence, which can intensify during disaster scenarios. Organized crime may take advantage of the chaos, with opportunistic individuals exploiting the lack of order and oversight. Looting, theft, and assault can become rampant as resources dwindle or collapse, overwhelms emergency services. When societal norms disintegrate, the resulting lawlessness can be exceedingly dangerous, especially for vulnerable individuals or families. Beyond organized crime, random acts of aggression also pose a significant risk. People who find themselves in dire circumstances may lash out violently in frustration or panic. Theft, looting, vandalism, and even outright attacks can become frequent, especially when basic survival needs like food and water are not being met. This unpredictability makes coexisting in a dense population during such crises incredibly unsafe. To survive such conditions, maintaining operational security, OPSEC, becomes vital. This concept revolves around staying inconspicuous and not drawing unnecessary attention to yourself or your supplies. Applying the gray man principle, blending into the environment and avoiding any actions or appearances that might make others suspect you have resources, can be a life-saving tactic. At the same time, being equipped for self-defense is essential, as you may need to protect yourself and your loved ones from potential threats. Without the right precautions, the inherent dangers posed by large groups of desperate or malicious individuals make cities an unwise choice during a disaster situation. 2. Government control during disasters. One of the most concerning reasons to avoid cities during a disaster is the increased potential for government control that often manifests in urban areas. Major cities are hubs for centralized governance, meaning policies and interventions are typically applied swiftly and decisively. While this might seem advantageous in maintaining order, it often comes at the cost of individual rights and freedoms, under the justification of the greater good. This can lead to restrictive policies, such as curfews, travel bans, and mandatory evacuations, which, while intended to preserve safety, can also limit personal autonomy and create unnecessary hardships for residents. Urban areas are also more likely to see extreme measures, such as confiscation and overregulation, during states of emergency. For example, in some cases, governments have placed restrictions on personal defense tools, even for those trying to secure their safety. This can leave city residents vulnerable to threats, both external and internal, as self-protection measures become increasingly difficult to exercise. Bureaucratic systems in cities also often prioritize collective management over individual needs, potentially delaying personal relief efforts or aid distribution. History provides clear examples of such governmental overreach during disasters. A notable case is the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in 2005. During this period, widespread chaos prompted authorities to enforce stringent policies, including the confiscation of legally owned firearms from residents. This left many defenseless in areas where law enforcement had limited capacity to offer protection. More recent examples further underscore this trend, with emergency declarations enabling sweeping powers that can disrupt daily life and erode constitutional protections. The risk of overbearing governmental intervention is significantly heightened in densely populated urban environments. where the scale and complexity of managing crises often require harsher enforcement measures. For individuals who value independence and self-reliance, these policies can create frustration, fear, and even unsafe conditions. Avoiding cities during disasters thus becomes a rational choice for ensuring greater personal freedom and security, as rural or less densely populated areas typically experience fewer restrictive measures and allow for increased adaptability during emergencies. 3. Lack of essential resources. When disaster strikes, cities quickly reveal their critical vulnerability to resource shortages, making them difficult places to survive. One of the biggest challenges arises from their heavy dependency on global supply chains. Modern cities are designed around just-in-time logistics systems, delivering food, water, and medical supplies as needed. This design allows for efficiency under normal conditions but turns into a significant liability during a disaster. When these intricate supply chains are disrupted, whether by physical damage, resource displacement, or communication breakdowns, cities face immediate shortages. Supermarkets can empty within hours, and restocking becomes nearly impossible in the chaos following a major crisis. Furthermore, urban environments limit the potential for self-sufficiency. Most cities, prioritizing infrastructure and development, feature limited green space or agricultural capacity. This lack of cultivable land makes growing food locally very difficult, leaving residents entirely reliant on outside sources for sustenance. Even access to water poses challenges. While rivers or other freshwater sources exist near some cities, they often require treatment for human consumption. Cities located near saltwater or in arid regions face even starker disadvantages. Without functioning utility systems, clean water is an immediate and critical concern that cities are typically ill-prepared to address in emergencies. The vulnerability of urban infrastructure compounds the issue. The operation of essential services, including electricity, water, gas, and telecommunication networks, relies on interconnected, centralized systems. A single point of failure, whether caused by an EMP attack, a cyber warfare incident, or a natural disaster like an earthquake, can lead to widespread outages, paralyzing the population. Without electricity, many systems for pumping water, refrigerating food, or even basic communication can grind to a halt. The cascading effects of such failures can turn even short-term disruptions into long-term crises. Ultimately, the convergence of supply chain dependency, limited self-reliance, and fragile infrastructure means that urban areas are inherently ill-equipped to sustain their populations during disasters. Disaster preparedness. For individuals seeking survival and self-sufficiency, cities present substantial risks that are difficult to mitigate in dire situations. Or minimum traffic escape options. One of the most critical challenges in urban areas during a disaster is the limited ability to evacuate swiftly and safely due to traffic congestion and insufficient escape routes. Cities are often densely populated, which means that when an emergency strikes, thousands or even millions of people simultaneously attempt to leave the area. This sudden mass exodus can lead to heavily congested roadways where accidents, stalled vehicles, and overall panic amplify the chaos. Emergency response vehicles, essential for saving lives and providing aid, are often unable to maneuver through the traffic, delaying critical assistance. Public transportation systems, which many city dwellers rely on daily, face their own set of limitations during a disaster. Services such as buses, trains, and subways may shut down completely or operate at reduced capacity due to damage, power outages, or overuse from the volume of evacuees. Even when these systems remain operational, they often cannot handle the overwhelming surge of people trying to escape. Overcrowding on trains or buses can lead to delays, unsafe conditions, or even physical altercations among panicked passengers. Additionally, those with limited mobility, such as the elderly or disabled, are particularly vulnerable when public transport becomes unavailable or inaccessible. Timely evacuation is critical in such situations, but it requires staying informed and acting decisively at the first warning signs of danger. Unfortunately, many residents delay action, either due to disbelief or lack of understanding about the severity of the threat. This hesitation can be life-threatening, as waiting too long to leave places individuals at greater risk of being trapped. Once roads become blocked and escape routes are overwhelmed, the possibility of safe evacuation diminishes significantly. Ultimately, traffic and limited escape options are a significant reason to reconsider urban living during a disaster. The sheer number of people, dependency on public systems, and limited infrastructure mean that cities are ill-equipped to handle mass evacuations efficiently, leaving many residents stranded and vulnerable. Preparedness and early action are vital. but even these efforts may not guarantee safety in such constrained conditions. 5. Disease and public health risks. Cities, with their high population density, are particularly vulnerable to the rapid spread of diseases, making them hazardous places to be during a disaster. The sheer number of people living in close quarters facilitates the faster transmission of illnesses, starting from common diseases like the seasonal flu to more severe and uncontrollable outbreaks such as avian influenza or even pandemics. The lack of personal space and increased human interaction make it nearly impossible to contain the spread of infectious diseases under such conditions. Medical facilities in cities are often overwhelmed during major crises, leaving many without the care they need. A significant risk factor in urban environments during disasters is water contamination. When infrastructure fails, untreated water and exposure to hazardous chemicals or biological agents from wastewater and reckless waste disposal can make water sources completely unusable. Contaminated drinking water can lead to outbreaks of waterborne diseases such as cholera, dysentery, and typhoid fever, which can spread rapidly without access to clean, safe alternatives. The scarcity of potable water exacerbates these problems, leaving residents desperate and forced to take greater risks to meet their basic needs. Another critical issue is the breakdown of sanitation systems. During disasters, trash removal services and sewage systems are often among the first city services to face disruption. Without these essential services, waste begins to accumulate quickly, creating breeding grounds for disease-carrying pests like rodents, flies, and mosquitoes. These pests can spread life-threatening diseases including plague, dengue fever, and leptospirosis, to name a few. The worsening hygiene conditions amplify the health risks for already vulnerable populations. Overall, the public health risks in urban areas during a disaster highlight the fragility of city infrastructure and the consequences of its failure. Disease outbreaks can lead to severe illness and loss of life, and the lack of sanitation and access to clean water only compounds these issues. Planning an alternative safe haven outside of dense urban centers may be a vital step to protect yourself and your loved ones in the face of an unpredictable disaster. 6. Chemical and environmental hazards. When disasters strike, cities often become hotbeds of chemical and environmental hazards due to their dense infrastructure and proximity to industrial zones. Industrial leaks and spills are a particular concern, as urban areas frequently house factories, chemical plants, and storage facilities containing hazardous substances. An ammonia leak, for example, can severely contaminate air, water, and soil, posing immediate and long-term health risks to residents. The containment and cleanup of such spills in disaster conditions become even more challenging, potentially leading to widespread exposure. Natural disasters amplify these risks, as events like earthquakes, hurricanes, or tornadoes can damage industrial facilities or pipelines, releasing dangerous chemicals into the environment. Broken infrastructure may result in widespread pollution, contaminating essential resources such as drinking water and agricultural land. For instance, a damaged oil refinery during an earthquake could release carcinogenic fumes and toxic byproducts, creating a hazard zone that is difficult to escape in a densely populated urban setting. Another major environmental threat in cities during disasters is the pollution caused by building debris and hazardous materials. Collapsed structures can release asbestos fibers, lead dust, or other toxic particles into the air. Individuals who are either sheltering in place or attempting to evacuate may unknowingly inhale such contaminants, resulting in severe respiratory health issues. These dangers linger long after the immediate disaster has passed, as cleanup and recovery efforts in cities often take weeks or months. The high concentration of chemicals, pollutants, and hazardous materials in cities makes them particularly vulnerable to cascading environmental hazards during disasters. Unlike rural areas, cities are overwhelmed with infrastructure and human activity that exacerbates these dangers. For those facing a crisis, this environment becomes increasingly difficult to survive in, with health risks multiplying over time. Thus, chemical and environmental hazards are a significant reason to avoid cities during a disaster, underscoring the importance of preparedness and the appeal of less densely populated areas in such scenarios. 7. Heightened vulnerability to attacks. One of the most significant reasons to avoid cities during a disaster is their heightened vulnerability to attacks. Urban areas, particularly those with strategic importance, are often prime targets for a variety of threats. Cities with military bases, vital energy infrastructure, or major transportation hubs become focal points during wartime or geopolitical tensions. The concentration of these assets in urban areas makes them highly attractive to adversaries seeking to disrupt a nation's operations or gain a tactical advantage. Another critical factor is the appeal cities hold for terrorism and ideologically motivated violence. High-density populations make urban centers an easy target for those seeking to instill fear and create widespread chaos. The potential for mass casualties is much greater in cities, amplifying the effectiveness of such attacks for perpetrators. Beyond terrorism, cities are also prone to social unrest, particularly during periods of economic instability or political turmoil. Riots, looting, and mob violence can escalate quickly in dense urban areas, overwhelming law enforcement and leaving residents vulnerable. Strategic infrastructure within cities also increases their risk during conflicts or large-scale disasters. Oil refineries, nuclear power plants, telecommunications hubs, and water treatment facilities are critical to a nation's functioning and are often located in or near urban centers. These facilities, while essential to everyday life, also make cities a high-priority target for hostile entities. Disabling such infrastructure not only affects those living in the city but also has a cascading effect on surrounding regions, further worsening the crisis. To compound these concerns, the sheer number of people living in cities complicates evacuation and emergency response efforts. Congested roadways, limited egress routes, and overburdened public services can lead to chaos and prevent people from finding safety when under attack. The dense urban environment also makes it harder to shield oneself from potential threats, trapping residents in a vulnerable position. Overall, the concentration of strategic assets, high population density, and the importance of urban infrastructure make cities a focal point for various attacks. During disasters, these issues are exacerbated, leaving urban residents exposed to greater harm and diminishing their chances of survival. 8. Overwhelmed emergency services. During widespread disasters, one of the most significant challenges in cities is the overwhelming burden on emergency services. Metropolitan areas, often densely populated with millions of residents, can quickly turn chaotic when disaster strikes, stretching police, fire departments, and paramedic teams far beyond their limits. The sheer number of emergencies that arise, from medical crises to fires, power outages, and incidents of civil unrest, far exceeds the capacity of first responders to address them. This leaves countless individuals waiting for aid that may arrive too late, if at all. Furthermore, relief efforts from federal, state, and local agencies face logistical hurdles when trying to provide assistance to urban areas during large-scale crises. Transportation bottlenecks, damaged infrastructure, and limited resources exacerbate delays in help reaching those in need. Non-profit relief organizations and emergency management services are also slowed, as they struggle to prioritize resources and provide aid where it is most urgently required. Dense populations make it incredibly difficult to cover every neighborhood or address every need in a timely manner, further compounding the risks of being in a city during a disaster. This is why self-reliance becomes critical for urban residents who may face prolonged waits for professional help. Individuals and families need to prepare in advance for such scenarios by stocking essential supplies, including non-perishable food, clean water, medications, flashlights, batteries, and first aid kits. Having a go-bag ready with basic necessities can make a difference in surviving the initial aftermath of disasters. Ensuring a personal safety plan is established, such as knowing multiple evacuation routes and ways to secure your home, can also significantly reduce vulnerability. Ultimately, the overwhelmed state of emergency services during a disaster highlights a major disadvantage of remaining in cities during times of crisis. Rural or suburban areas, which often experience lower population density, may have better chances of managing emergencies and providing relief in the wake of a catastrophe. For those who prioritize safety and preparedness, avoiding the challenges tied to urban emergency services during disasters is a rational consideration. 9. Unique risks of urban areas. Urban areas come with their own specific set of challenges and risks, especially during a disaster. While cities offer the convenience of centralized services and infrastructures, this very concentration also makes them highly vulnerable in times of crisis. For survivalists and those concerned with potential disasters, cities represent ground zero for a variety of threats that are far less prevalent in rural areas. One of the most significant risks in urban settings is the prevalence of urban-specific threats, including higher crime rates. During a disaster, resources become scarce, and law enforcement may be overwhelmed or absent entirely. This can lead to an increase in theft, assaults, and even riots as people become desperate to secure food, water, or shelter. The sheer density of people amplifies the likelihood of conflict, making safety a much more pressing concern compared to rural regions. Furthermore, cities tend to serve as strategic targets that heighten their vulnerability during acts of war or large-scale disasters. Airports, refineries, government buildings, and other critical infrastructures are often centralized in metropolitan areas. These facilities are not just essential for the functioning of the city, but also represent prime points of interest for enemy forces during warfare or terrorist attacks. The potential for collateral damage in such scenarios is immense, putting countless lives at risk. Additionally, evacuation can become a logistical nightmare in cities due to their population density and infrastructural limitations. Roads can quickly become gridlocked as panicked individuals attempt to flee simultaneously. Public transportation systems are often incapable of accommodating large-scale evacuations, leading to chaos and potentially trapping residents within the disaster's path. Even access to essential supplies can become restricted as supply chains to urban areas are disrupted. For individuals preparing for worst-case scenarios, it becomes clear that cities present more hazards than advantages. The unique risks stemming from high populations, strategic importance, and logistical challenges make urban areas particularly dangerous during periods of unrest or disaster. When evaluating survival plans, avoiding urban centers should be a primary consideration for those seeking greater security and stability. 10. Personal preparedness and limitations. When considering the potential risks associated with urban environments during a disaster, personal preparedness and understanding your limitations are paramount. Urban areas, by their nature, are highly populated and resource-dependent, making them particularly vulnerable when disaster strikes. One critical reason to avoid cities during such events is the difficulty of maintaining personal safety and acquiring necessary supplies. Preparing for disasters while living in a city comes with significant challenges. Dense populations mean that essential resources such as food, water, and medical supplies tend to deplete quickly. Supply chains, often disrupted during emergencies, may fail to replenish these items when most needed, leaving urban residents in increasingly precarious situations. Proximity to industrial areas or critical infrastructure also makes cities more susceptible to secondary hazards like chemical spills, fires, or widespread contamination during a disaster. Relocating to rural or suburban areas is often advised, as these environments typically offer greater self-sufficiency and reduced reliance on external systems. However, this option may not be feasible for everyone due to job constraints, family obligations, or financial considerations. If you must remain in an urban area, preparedness is key. Stockpiling basic necessities, including non-perishable food, clean water, medical supplies, and protective gear, will help mitigate some risks. It's also essential to stay informed about potential threats and to develop an actionable emergency plan tailored to your unique circumstances. Cities during disasters often become chaotic as infrastructure fails, law enforcement resources are stretched thin, and public panic escalates. This environment amplifies personal limitations, whether they be physical, financial, or situational. Recognizing these limitations in advance enables individuals to make smarter decisions and take proactive steps when emergencies arise, such as establishing an escape route or identifying safer areas to retreat.